Good afternoon. We'll start this session. First, I'll introduce myself. Gideon Rotaremo are my names, and I work with the UN Economic Commission for Africa in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. This session is a continuation of the session we just had before the coffee break, and it draws from the previous discussions we had, and more broadly, we'll be looking into and identifying the future areas of work for the network to take forward in support of implementation of the GCM. Migration, we've observed in the various sessions we've had in the presentations. It's both a challenge and opportunity, and it's a fact of life. How we tell the story, drawing on fact while rejecting prejudice, is even more critical. Conflict, food shortage, decent work deficits, issues of climate change are amongst the many challenges, and they are part of the picture. And these disruptions often interact with longer-term trends, including demographic shifts and rapid technological changes, and equally the central role of migrants play in most societies. Sometimes it's acknowledged, and many times it presents another picture. How do we more effectively communicate that while acknowledging and addressing the challenges presented, particularly to the migrant themselves and the poorly governed migration? Based on the overview of the global transformations and their interactions with migration patterns in the first panel, we'll explore the lessons learned and also areas of future work and action in support of the GCM implementation, including as the UN system prepares for the summit of the future. The speakers will discuss network planned actions for the future and recommendations to take forward. Let me call upon our first panelist, Mohammed. Mohammed is a mobility analyst in disaster and displacement in the Intergovernmental Authority on Development and Climate Prediction Application Center at the IGAD Secretariat. The question that Mohammed is going to address is in the areas of that are the climate-related risks. How can disaster displacement management be enhanced, and what lessons have been learned from programs supporting community members to access sustainable livelihoods and decent green employment? Over to you, Mohammed.
Thanks a lot, moderator, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to join this panelist and participate this meeting, the 5th annual meeting of the UN Network on Migration. Let me take you briefly on the background, the IGAD region. The IGAD region is one of the most diverse regions in the world, including areas of economic growth and investment on one hand, but also in areas of prone of conflict and political instability, humanitarian crisis, and disasters on the other hand. The IGAD region is regarded one of the most vulnerable to climate variability and change. Countries in the region are regularly affected by the slow onset disasters, but also rapid and extreme weather climatic processes and events, mostly environmental and land degradation, drought, water level changes, rainfall variability, food floods, landslides, and storms. These events negatively impact the ecosystem, crop yields, habitable areas, livelihoods, jobs, and infrastructure. The complex relationship between climate change, livelihoods, labor markets, and human mobility in the IGAD region is complex and context dependent. Various forms of human mobility, including displacement, migration, and planned relocation, are influenced by diverse drivers and structural factors, compelling individuals to leave their homes. Anticipated population growth, environmental changes, and the increase in the frequency of climate-related hazards are expected to escalate migration and displacement in the coming years. Key figures in the IGAD region highlight the substantial impact of human mobility, with 6.3 million international migrants, 16.9 million internally displaced people, and 4.9 million refugees and asylum seekers. Additionally, 3.1 million individuals have been newly displaced by disasters, underscoring the vulnerability to environmental events in the region. The economic also contribution is for the migrants who are abroad are 8.8 billion inward remittances in 2021, for example, and 3.4 million migrant workers in 2019, emphasizing the economic role of labor migration. These figures collectively depict the multifaceted nature of human mobility in the IGAD region, encompassing voluntary and forced movements along with economic contributions. The region's demographic landscape reflects the dynamic nature of human mobility. The IGAD regional strategies recognizes mobility as both an opportunity and a concern for development. Strategic interventionist priorities include free movement of persons, transhumans, youth skilling, decent work, and basic services. Notably, the IGAD Council of Ministers adopted the Free Movement of Persons Protocol in 2021 with specific provisions for disaster situations. The Djibouti Declaration on Labor, Employment, and Labor Migration has been also adopted, and the Kampala Ministerial Declaration on Migration, Environment, and Climate Change also further demonstrates regional leaders' urgency and commitment addressing these issues. On the MPTF joint program that has been implemented in IGAD with a budget of 2.15 million, was a partnership between International Organization for Migration, the International Labour Organization, the Platform on Disaster Displacement, hosted under the UNOPS, and the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. It was a joint program together with IGAD Secretariat, including the IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center and the member states of IGAD, including Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, and Uganda. The program was organized across 4 pillars: data and knowledge, national and regional policy frameworks, disaster displacement, preparedness, and regular migration pathways. In particular, efforts were directed toward strengthening evidence-based and inclusive policymaking, increasing preparedness for disaster displacement, improving access to information on migrant rights and environment preservation, as well as increasing access to sustainable livelihood and green jobs. The key achievements and lessons learned include strengthening evidence-based and inclusive policymaking. The program prioritized evidence-based policymaking by collecting and analyzing data on climate change's impact on human mobility across regions. It also commissioned studies, produced recommendations integrated into climate change, disaster, and development frameworks, tested and refined through pilot projects in Kenya and Somalia. Regionally, the program strengthened government's disaster displacement capacity, offering insights into future scenarios and creating decision-making model for flood-related displacement. Also, workshops and platforms like the Greater Horn of Africa Climate Outlook Forum facilitated knowledge sharing and gathering. The program also has supported increased preparedness on disaster displacement and increased access to sustainable livelihoods and green jobs. But also the program has contributed migrant workers improved access to information and rights and environmental preservation. And also, finally, the program addressed cross-cutting elements, including gender, human rights, and whole of society approaches. In conclusion, the final external evaluation of the Multi-Partner Trust Fund joint program at IGAD region indicated proof of concept of the program, with many of the activities showing promise for scaling up if future interventions incorporate the lessons learned and best practices. There is also a demand to build on the 4 pillars and replicate these approaches across the region. While celebrating achievements, challenges in sustainability persist. Knowledge and skills transfer to regional institutions, such as integrating displacement data into ICPAC services, has been a key success. To ensure the lasting impact of these efforts, ongoing support is crucial, especially as local entities take ownership. Sustainable funding and continued capacity building are essential to empower IGAD governments in effectively addressing the complex interplay of migration, climate change, and disasters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think the multifaceted nature of human mobility in the IGAD region, Eastern Africa, I think has been highlighted, both the policy frameworks, evidence-based, and achievements, and also the way forward, looking forward within the context of the GCM have been highlighted. I want to now move to our second panelist, Cindy Monroe, Minister Councillor, the Permanent Mission of Canada. I think the question is, what does a successful regular pathway scheme look like? And what have we learned from those schemes, and how can these learnings help amplify positive migration narratives? Over to you, Cindy.
Thank you, Gideon, and thank you to the network for having Canada on this panel today. It's both an opportunity and a challenge to take a step back and look at the big questions about the future of work and bring that to something concrete about how we can develop immigration systems that are also going to maintain public support for migration through positive narratives. So many of the themes and trends that have been described through the previous speakers on the future of migration are very familiar to Canada. To take one example, looking at demographics, we're expecting immigration to drive 100% of population growth by 2032, while Canadian society continues to age. And according to our 2021 census, 23% of people in Canada are immigrants, which is the largest percentage in Canada in 150 years and the highest among G7 countries. So if we look at the future of work and the importance that immigration already plays in our society, we know that social cohesion, public confidence, and our economic interests can only be sustained if we can make sure that there's an attachment to the labor market through the availability of good jobs, by upholding worker protections. And we need to continue to support the strong integration and inclusion of newcomers into our labor markets and into our societies. So over the next few minutes, I plan to share Canada's perspective on regular pathways, some of the key considerations and lessons learned that we have and what makes them work, and what are the links to narratives. So Regular pathways have long been an essential part of Canada's migration and protection systems. They help us ensure respect for human rights and dignity, mitigating the risks associated with irregular movements and such as exploitation and abuse. For Canada, regular pathways have also long been a key to prosperity. They contribute to Canada's economic growth by providing a safe and orderly way for us to bring people to Canada that are contributing to our labor market needs. But regular pathways don't inherently bring these benefits. They have to be well designed. So in our experience, a successful regular pathway needs to have a few key characteristics to work. The first is policy coherence. We need really clear objectives and an understanding about what we're trying to achieve with this policy. What is the gap or the problem that we're trying to solve? The second is an ability to operationalize it. We need to have clear criteria for the selection, and we need the resources or IT systems to be able to actually run the operation once we set up the pathway. A third is clear communications with migrants so that they can have clear expectations on what is the process, what are the procedures, timelines, and next steps. That can help make this seem like a more interesting option than taking an irregular route. The next would be buy-in from partners and stakeholders. This requires appropriate consultations, including migrant voices and perspectives, also subnational governments, employers, communities, anyone with a stake in the outcomes of these policies that we're trying to build. And finally, clear public communications. We need to maintain public support for these pathways. And one of the ways we do that is by using data to show the outcomes that they're having for Canadians. Canada doesn't get these things all right with every one of our pathways. Our programs are in constant evolution. And as someone who has made a lot of visa decisions, I can tell you that our decision makers are constantly having to learn new policies, new changes, ways we're trying to fix and improve and tweak the programs to achieve the kinds of goals that we set out for them in the first place. And through this process, we've taken away 3 lessons learned about how we need to be approaching the development of our regular pathways of the future. So one of them is partnerships. Engaging in meaningful partnerships with various levels of government and stakeholders has been really crucial to making migration work. And it also is in line with the GCM principles of whole of government and whole of society approaches. For example, the government of Canada has been working with regional governments or provinces in Canada to have economic programs that are specifically targeting regional economic needs that differ from one part of the country to another, and that's been quite successful. But it requires us to really be listening to what are the needs at the local level and the employers and the communities at those local levels. The second is leveraging the immigration system creatively by using innovative pilots to test ideas. Setting up a pathway is no easy feat, but what we've done is built into our immigration legislation the ability to set up pilot programs for our economic pathways, and that lets us test options for a limited time on a small scale to get proof of concept before we decide to make something a full-scale permanent program. Since we did this, we've made 2 pilot programs permanent, both that were quite innovative when we first started to dream them up. One is a startup visa program for entrepreneurs backed by venture capital. And the other is the Atlantic Immigration Program, which is one of these regional pilots that we set up to try and meet the needs of our Atlantic provinces on the East Coast. And the third lesson that we've learned is how important it is to be constantly monitoring and evaluating programs once they're in place, because not only to see what works and what doesn't work, but as we've talked about this context that we're change that we're in, things that used to work before don't work now, and we have to keep adapting and reacting. We're using operational data, business intelligence, surveys, statistics from our immigration database, from our census surveys, from our national statistics. We're consulting with different levels of government and stakeholders. We're using international comparisons, and we're looking hard at what other countries are doing to be able to borrow the good ideas from what's working elsewhere. And these evaluations, when we do them, are also made public. So we're not hiding from what's working, what's not working in our communications with the public. So the last theme that I wanted to turn to was the link between all of this and migration narratives. What the future of migration will look like will depend an awful lot on whether we're able to maintain the trust of societies in our governments to be able to manage migration well. This trust is what gives us the room to maneuver. and to create regular pathways. We've been quite intentional about talking about the positive benefits of immigration to Canada, and when there are issues, to focus on the need for system changes rather than on problems with migrants or refugees coming into the country themselves, and trying to really work also with partners like Ecuador, like the Philippines, like the mayor's mechanism, on trying to understand better what we can do with migration narratives to make them more effective. So I want to close just by bringing one example that brings all of this together in an example of a regular pathway. That's innovation, partnerships, it's evaluating and changing our examples and trying to figure out how to build on them and building narratives at the same time. And that's refugee labor mobility. This is something that we're using to try to lift the barriers for refugees to access our economic pathways, in addition to resettlement, so that we're creating more possibilities for permanent, durable solutions for them, while also meeting our economic needs. And if you can hear one of the refugees who has come through this program talk about the dignity of being selected for what she can contribute and not for her vulnerability, it's extremely powerful to hear it. It gives me goosebumps every time. And that speaks to the power that this kind of a pathway can have for changing narratives about the way people see migrants, refugees, and newcomers in our societies. And it's something that's been done through very, very extensive partnerships. And so it really brings together these examples that and it brings together what we're all here for, to be building partnerships, to be able to implement the Global Compact on Migration, and in this case, also the Global Compact on Refugees, together in partnership. So thank you for the chance to be here and work with all of you.
Thank you, Cindy. I think I couldn't have put it any better than Cindy. Stakeholder engagement, and all of government, all of society approach, innovation, and adapting and reacting, with adapting what works, and also developing trust of all the stakeholders, the innovation and partnerships. These are many issues that Cindy mentioned. They comprise what a regular pathway scheme that has been successful, what it looks like. I want to now go to our next panelist, Ghislaine. I think the question that we have for Ghislaine is, she's a youth delegate on the Climate Mobility Initiative. And the question is, what is being done to develop portable skills for green jobs, especially for youth that are affected by climate-related mobility? And what are the lessons that we can learn, and how can these actions be amplified? Over to you, Ghislaine.
Good afternoon to everyone from the ACMI Youth Forum. I think we've heard about the numbers increasing on human mobility, and I'll just be adding on that to talk about how could we build livelihoods for youth located in these high-risk displacements. So there have been efforts to develop portable green skills, especially for youth youth impacted by climate-related mobility. And we also have community-based youth-led initiatives that prioritize frontline skill provision that have also contributed to green skill development. However, there is a call for more green skill initiatives, and future endeavors should draw from lessons outlined below. So from the past panel sessions we've had in the days, I think what stuck with me is that we keep on revolving about building resilience for migrants' well-being, which is the goal we are trying to achieve. And I think that aligns very well with the potential of green skills. But the challenge still remains, which is when green energy supply lacks reliability, security, and affordability, it poses obstacles for usage from the users and also causing discouragement for the communities. For instance, there is a waste to energy initiative I co-led, and the aim was to provide biogas to communities and cooking gas to communities. So the project demonstrated good feasibility. We could produce a little bit of gas, but then it wasn't reliable due to low output efficiency. This experience shows that the necessity of preventing the closure of promising projects. One effective strategy we could prevent such setbacks involves amplifying initiatives like Green Innovative Labs, which serve as a platform for young people to explore and test their innovative solutions related to climate-related challenges before sending them to the market or to communities to use. By establishing these labs, youths can actually exchange with professionals and get their innovation tested. Also, these labs can host hackathons where these youths can pitch their ideas with professionals that can actually guide them and help them get funding. Another valuable lesson learned is the critical role of infrastructure in supporting youth-led initiative. Often, despite the ingenuity and young entrepreneurship and innovative ideas, there is an absence of infrastructure that can undermine the realization of most of these ideas. Particularly in the global south, youth encounter a challenge in scaling their production due to prohibitive prices and the lack of mass production facilities in Africa. To address this, amplifying partnerships among public, private, and civil society entities become an essential to boost youth initiative. By leveraging this collaboration, promising ideas can receive the necessary support they need to thrive and overcome infrastructural limitations. Fostering such an
no,
environment is going to
that's good.
conduce
That is
and
good.
enhance innovation and
yeah,
entrepreneurship
I know,
spirit
I know.
among these youths living in these high-risk areas. Hence, targeted investment and policy frameworks can further enhance this action, ensuring that youth-led initiatives have the resources and support they need to succeed. One other crucial lesson learned is the importance of climate finance for youth-led initiative in advancing their innovative solutions. Despite youth's determination in addressing climate change, many youth-led startups face significant hurdles due to insufficient funding support. I had to stop the initiative I was leading because I could not continue. I was putting a lot of finance into getting the raw materials, but I could not produce a lot of gas because I didn't have the right method to research about the topic. So there exists an urgent need to fund these initiatives, particularly those spearheaded by youth working on the front line. Hence, it is crucial to enhance awareness and accessibility to funding avenues. And one method to do that is by increasing social media presence, which can serve as an effective tool in disseminating information about available funding opportunities and requirements. Additionally, fostering partnership with youth organizations, donor partners, and other stakeholders can streamline the application process and provide valuable support to young innovators. Another significant challenge that lies in generating interest in majority of youths in the global south. Only a small fraction is inclined to make a difference. The lack of interest in green skills is primarily attributed to low awareness levels regarding climate change, climate mobility, and how climate change actually impacts their lives. Many youths are unaware of why they are being displaced. All they know is they are trying to seek for better opportunities without understanding the underlying reasons. Youth on the move experience discouragement, causing them to lose sight of their goals and sense of accomplishment. Hence, makes it difficult for them to take action. To address these issues, initiatives aimed at raising awareness, such as the Climate Mobility Guidebook, needs to be expanded. At COP28, the SMI Youth Forum launched a youth consulted book intended to serve as a guidebook for youth on the move. This resource provides insight on where to start, what actions could they take, and how to navigate these challenges at that critical stage of their life. There is a vision for future editions to navigate, which is to focus on different career paths, where we want a resource where a youth in critical situation can pick up this document and be able to navigate themselves. Do they want to advocate? It can outline to them the processes they could take on. Hence, in conclusion, the journey towards developing portable green skill and empowering youth affected by climate-related mobility demands increased green skilling initiatives and collaborative action. Although there are initiative and community-based youth-led efforts that have made strides, but the challenge still persists, which includes unreliable green energy supply, infrastructural limitation, funding barriers, and low awareness level. By leveraging partnerships and innovation solutions like the Green Innovative Labs and improved access to climate finance and funding opportunities, we can amplify efforts to support youth-led initiatives. Through expanded awareness initiative and accessible resources such as the Climate Mobility Guidebook, we can inspire and equip youth to navigate towards a future in migration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ghislaine. I think issues of information flows, media partnerships, and then financing, I think leveraging on collaboration have been quite well highlighted. I think our next panelist is Ms. Melissa, stakeholders, partnerships and stakeholders advisor holding a refugee seat. And the guiding question is how to foster meaningful participation and representation of migrants, youth in policy development, and what actions should the network take forward to enable more participation channels? Over to you, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. I work with Refugees Seeking Equal Access at the Table. We're a refugee-led organization focused on enhancing global refugee responses through meaningful refugee participation. I will start giving a little bit of an overview of why meaningful migrant participation is important. People with lived experience of displacement need to be part of the conversations and decisions that directly impact their lives. However, meaningful participation is not only a moral imperative, it is also a strategic and innovative approach because responses and solutions that are informed and driven by displaced people are more effective, suitable, and sustainable. Migrants hold the most information on what are the challenges and gaps they face. They're also first responders through migrant-led organizations, and migrant leaders develop technical and policy expertise. Therefore, migrants must be engaged in global meetings on migration, not only due to their lived experience, but also for their thematic expertise. I really want to highlight the element of technical expertise because it is crucial to ensure meaningfulness and avoid tokenism. By listening and incorporating migrant technical knowledge and expertise, we can actually enhance and make more effective global responses to displacement. Both the Global Compact for Refugees and the Progress Declaration of the MRF recognize the value of meaningful participation, not only through their whole of society approach, but also directly in the case of the GCR on paragraph 34, which says responses are most effective when they actively and meaningfully engage those that are intended to protect and assist. The Progress Declaration of the MRF member states committed to include migrants' meaningful contribution to policy development. So a couple of recommendations based on what has happened in the refugee space and on meaningful refugee participation. The Global Refugee Forum just occurred in December of 2023. The participation of refugees increased from about 70 refugees present in the first forum in 2019 to over 300 refugee participants in the second forum. I want to stress that this has been a refugee-led movement and that UNHCR and other stakeholders have responded to their advocacy. We're currently in the process of assessing whether refugee participation was meaningful during the GRF and looking beyond numbers, and we will release a report in the coming months evaluating if refugee participation was meaningful. But in the case for the network, I want to recommend the following. First, ensure timely preparation, ensure timely preparation. The next IMRF is 2 years away, and planning a non-tokenistic sustainable approach takes a significant effort and time. The time is now to start those conversations and ensure that preparations are done in a timely manner. The network can open a call for migrant experts to apply to attend the MRF based on their lived experience, but additionally, and more importantly, on their policy and technical expertise. The network can invite a significant number of migrant-led organizations and their delegations as well. Migrant experts and organizations should be involved in the preparation leading up to the forum, including by contributing in pledge development, defining priorities, and having significant roles in both the plenary and side events. This just happened at the DRF, in which 70 refugee experts were invited through an open call process, and 50 RLOs and their delegations were invited, in addition to refugee children, refugee journalists, and refugee youth groups. The network and other stakeholders, particularly states, can look into creating migrant advisory boards. These are comprised from around 9 to 15 migrant representatives or migrant-led organizations chosen through an independent selection committee and engaged for their technical expertise. States can choose from those boards a migrant representative to attend the MRF as advisors in their national delegations. Several countries have already created refugee advisory boards, and so has UNHCR. Ensure the inclusion of academia. Academia can provide support for advisory boards or migrant-led organizations that are participating in the forum through evidence-based research and ensure capacity building opportunities for migrants engaging in the global migration regime. And finally, a call to migrant leaders and migrant-led organizations to come together as a coalition or other forms of working groups to foster meaningful refugee participation in the lead up to the MRF. Any participatory process should be led by those who are directly impacted. And a significant and inclusive conversation on participatory approaches must be inclusive of migrants and be migrant-led and with their advice and input. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marisa. I think the question of inclusion of migrants themselves, migrants telling their story, and including and setting up some of these structures and giving the migrants themselves agency has quite well been articulated. And the time to do that, the time to engage migrants and migrant-led organizations is now, as we look to the next IMRF. I want to draw your attention to our Slido, and we have a key question is what key priority areas of work would you like the network focus on in the lead up to the 2026 International Migration Review Forum? Please answer with the 3 keywords, and it is up. Let's see what. Please respond to that. Now, I want to now open the floor for your interventions. Maximum 2 minutes, not more than 2 minutes. But first, I want to call upon the participant from IFRC to give us your intervention, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My name is Boubacar Singate. I am the Senior Migration Officer for the Sahel region, working with the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. In the Sahel region, West and Central Africa, and elsewhere around the world, thousands of people on the move, migrants, refugees, and other displaced people continue to face significant levels of risk during their migratory journeys. Our national societies continue to provide life-saving humanitarian assistance and protection services to migrants and displaced persons. When we provide support, we focus first and foremost on people's need, not their status or category. This principled humanitarian approach is how national societies and our network of local staff and volunteers are promoting complementary implementation of the GCM and the GCI, both at local and global levels. Our humanitarian service points, or otherwise HSPs, are an essential part of this approach. HSPs are safe and neutral spaces where migrants and refugees can access support along land borders and at strategic transit points along migration routes in various countries. For example, between 2021 to 2023, over 20 humanitarian service points have been established in the Sahel region, saving lives, bringing access to essential services like healthcare, psychosocial support, shelter, food, life-saving information, family reunification, and safe referrals to more than 60,000 people. National societies continue to conduct evidence-based humanitarian diplomacy and advocacy on behalf of migrants and refugees. As a way forward, we provide two recommendations. One, learning from and working in genuine partnership with communities who are most affected. And two, prioritizing efforts to identify champions and coordination strategies to save lives and reduce risk along migration routes. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from, thank you. We'll hear from this online participant, Ms. Kanya Bashe from Global Green Yoma Consultant. Please give us your intervention.
Thank you. So I would like to start by emphasizing that Green Yoma supports the United Nations Migration Network in the view that every youth should have access to opportunities for upskilling, learning, and employment, and for economic empowerment. I'd first like to discuss how migrants and refugees, especially youth on the move, are vital and are a useful network to tap into. Then I'll go into to discuss what Yoma and Green Yoma is to give more context. Youth on the Move is a powerful network to tap into for one, climate change mitigation. Green Yoma's approach is the more the merrier. We use citizen science methodologies where we engage young people using the Yoma digital platform to collect physical data relating to ground truthing activities. This involves taking photos to verify satellite and aerial imagery. An example of this would be our reforestation project and our wash-in activities, where young people are engaged in challenges to monitor water quality at specific sites, as well as water infrastructure, including identifying leaking manholes, as well as sewage leakages. We have two very successful projects relating to this. The first project is Donate Water. This initiative was hosted by Goodwill as a challenge that took place in Nigeria. The second project is in the province of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, and this project is called EnviroChamps. This is one of Green Yoma's flagship initiatives, where youth in lower socioeconomic communities are trained to monitor the quality of water sources in their community. And their findings are collated and recorded on an app developed by CGIAR called MiniSAS, which allows for the active and continuous monitoring of water sources. Citizen science needs engaged youth on a large scale to be active in climate change mitigation and to be on the ground as vital monitoring and evaluation tools, as we can have accurate and real-time understanding of climate change and environmental issues. And I would like to now go into how Yoma and Green Yoma was developed. Yoma is a UNICEF initiative and is an ecosystem comprising of local and global partners aimed for facilitating learning to earning pathways by creating an integrated platform. Young people can access over 5,000 online learning courses, all free of charge. And we have the aspiration of making most of these courses zero-rated, meaning no data will be needed to access these courses. The platform provides opportunities for upskilling, employment, incentivized impact, task participation, capacity building, and the formation of networks. Yoma incentivizes the participation of young people on the platform by using an ever-evolving crypto token called Slato. Completed courses and completed challenges and engagements have a certain Zlato allocation where young people can redeem and trade in with participating partners for rewards such as airtime, data, clothing vouchers, and transportation passes. The Green Yoma, what Green Yoma is it forms a part of the larger Yoma ecosystem, and this is an incentive which facilitates learning to earning pathways that are specifically focused on youth skills development for the green economy, such as food security, agriculture, ecosystems, circular economy, and ecopreneurship. Yoma was developed using a human and youth-centered design to tackle the issues of youth unemployment and the lack of adequate skills needed in the workforce in the 21st century. So we took youth and they were actively involved in developing the concept of Yoma, and they identified two issues. The first issue was that the support structure and the interventions to youth to attain employment and economic development was fragmented, and the fact that
Kenya?
yes.
Sorry, excuse me, Kenya, we need to close your intervention. You have 30 seconds. Thank you.
All right, one thing, and development start. And the second one is that talent is universal, but opportunities are not. So Yoma is basically meant to leverage and give all youth the equal opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanya, for your intervention. We'll now take the delegate from El Salvador.
Gracias a los panelistas por sus presentaciones. En relación a la última pregunta, como país estamos conscientes que no existe una ruta única para la participación de nuestros migrantes, en especial de los jóvenes. En El Salvador hemos tenido experiencias interesantes trabajando con nuestra población migrante y en ese sentido consideramos oportuno los siguientes aspectos y compartir con ustedes algunos elementos. En primer lugar, reconocer las contribuciones de los migrantes en todos los niveles de acción hasta el más alto nivel, trabajando en la gestión de la migración, incluido el reconocimiento a la diáspora y a las personas migrantes como actores para el desarrollo, incluyendo a los migrantes y a los jóvenes en espacios de diálogo y debate en materia migratoria, por ejemplo, como panelistas, audiencias en conversatorios, foros dirigidos a actores gubernamentales, regionales, organismos internacionales y de sociedad civil, integrándoles en los procesos de formulación e implementación de políticas públicas, planes nacionales y en la evaluación de proyectos e iniciativas sociales, fortaleciendo nuestras áreas de acción a favor de la implementación del pacto, identificando y reconociendo las necesidades específicas de los migrantes según su contexto, lo cual debe estar sustentado en datos e información que evidencie sus necesidades reales, gestionando oportunidades para que los jóvenes brinden sus aportaciones en los diferentes espacios de diálogo, así como se promueva su formación en diferentes sectores, compartiendo sus visiones a fin de promover una migración segura, ordenada y regular. Por lo anterior, consideramos que la red podría mantenerse como un socio que apuesta por las prioridades que los países hemos establecido para la atención, protección, reivindicación de nuestros migrantes y las juventudes, fomentando su participación en todos los niveles, una participación activa con un rol central. Reforzar el apoyo a la gestión de la información y conocimiento para fomentar la toma de decisiones con base en evidencia. Todo esto junto al seguimiento de acciones concretas que permitan visibilizar la voz de las personas migrantes. Y por último, impulsar la asesoría e inversión en estrategias que sientan las bases para que los países gestionen mejor su gobernanza migratoria. Gracias.
Now we'll hear from Maria from Puno. Thank you.
Thank you. We are pleased to acknowledge the insightful reflection shared in today's panel discussion on enhancing meaningful migrant participation. Centering migrant expertise and experiences is vital to the commitment of the Global Compact for Migration to people-centered, human rights-based governance. And so we wanted to take this opportunity to echo the recommendations made by Marissa on migrant advisory groups, migrant inclusion in delegations, and adequate resourcing for participation. As a next step, we suggest holding a GCM talk on models for meaningful migrant participation. This could be on global in scope or region specific in the context of the regional reviews. This would allow an exchange of practice drawn on existing models of migrant participation, which we heard an example of from São Paulo this morning. This talk or talks could hear from existing state and intergovernmental organization practice and migrant experience and consultative processes. And so by fostering this open dialogue and sharing of experiences, the network can really strengthen the foundation of the GCM, promoting a more inclusive, effective, and human-centered approach to migration governance. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear now from Diversity Network Australia.
Bulavanaka, Talavolava, Maloilele. My name is Bernie Golding. I'm wearing two hats, one for Pacific Women's Indigenous Network and the other for Diversity Network Australia. I note that I appear to be the only Pacific representative from the region that is the most disaster prone, both to slow moving and disaster activities related to climate change. I also note that there is a hybrid option, but it's 4 a.m. in Suva, so I'm not sure that people are able to participate there. In terms of policy, what I would like to encourage is that we include priority populations. For us, that is the LGBTQI community, Indigenous communities, and people with disability. In Australia, we have, and through the Pacific, we have great examples of where when people are included and diversity is celebrated and it is called out in policies, we actually see very positive high-performing teams, less issues with social cohesion and disengaged youth, and opportunities where culture is celebrated. I do also want to encourage where we have Indigenous communities on the move, that there are efforts made to connect with Indigenous communities of destination countries, because all of those things bring vibrancy and culture. Within Indigenous communities in our region, we also have fantastic climate change, culture exchange, and languages that can be celebrated and bring value and benefits to all communities. And just to conclude, if I may encourage moving forward for those countries who have funding available, that opportunities are given to people from the Pacific to participate in meetings such as these. We had a number of people who were not able to visit, but both for the GFMD last week due to visa issues and also due to funding issues. So for the people of the Pacific, Vinaka Sarva level, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Sepulveda. I am speaking on behalf of the AFL-CIO, the largest federation of unions in the United States, representing 60 unions that represent 12.5 million workers across every sector of the economy and of every immigration status. As we talk about the future of migration and the future of GCM implementation, how we respond to the unprecedented mass human displacement that we will face due to the climate crisis will be the defining issue of the century. And we will only be able to find truly sustainable solutions if we engage in social dialogue that looks beyond our traditional policy silos. That means climate policy, migration policy, labor policy, aligning to create rights-based solutions. And importantly, that means that we cannot continue to impose top-down solutions that exclude the voices of migrant workers. And to be successful in fostering the participation and representation of migrant workers, then we must ensure that any and every approach that we take center decent work and universal rights. And I'm not just talking about rights on paper, but truly enforceable rights. Migrants must have access to quality healthcare, education, pensions, safe workplace, protection from gender and racial discrimination, and equal treatment and access to public services and social protections. But most importantly, I'm talking core labor rights like freedom of association, the right to collectively bargain and to organize. And why do we focus on this so much? It's because we know that through collective action, those who are often marginalized, like migrant workers, can truly make their voices heard. The freedom to take action with your peers without fear is the most effective way to achieve agency, dignity, and respect. And that's why we need, if we want to be successful in addressing the massive challenges ahead. From that starting point, then we can focus on strategies like green job creation to promote community resilience in countries of origin, transit, and destination, ensuring that new technologies will provide enough good jobs to replace those that are lost, and that immigrant and non-immigrant workers alike can have access to these jobs through skilling and reskilling programs. We need to invest in long-term development and adaptation strategies in countries that are most vulnerable to climate change so that those who want to have the right to stay. And most importantly, for those who must migrate because of unavoidable realities of climate change, then we must focus on rights-based pathways. Not through temporary labor programs that tie the fates and livelihoods of workers to the employers, those programs that we know have a proven track record of abuse and exploitation, but through humanitarian permanent pathways that keep up with the current global realities by giving climate refugees international protection, where workers will be able to migrate with their families and resettle in countries where they'll be granted equal rights, not as a subclass of exploitable workers like we often see now. When we proceed in ways that expand the rights and opportunities for workers, then the expansion of permanent migration pathways becomes more politically viable. That is how we use migration policy to expand the workforce in ways that add value rather than fueling a race to the bottom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Colleagues, we are running out of time, and I would like to call upon Bella. He's the Chief of Population Trends and Analysis Branch at the UNDESA Population Division, to wrap up for us this session. Over to you, Bella.
Thank you very much, Gideon, and good afternoon, colleagues, or mornings, or evenings, or nights, wherever you are online. I'm very grateful to the organizers for inviting me to wrap up the afternoon session and to present next steps. In the few minutes that I have, I would like to address 3 points: future migration trends, future migration work of the network, future migration work at the UN. First, let's look at the future of migration trends. We've heard this afternoon that migration is unlikely to decrease given the various drivers: poverty, economic inequality, demographic diversity, labor markets. Thank you to Marina for illustrating some of these transformations. She and Ms. Monroe illustrated the linkages between population dynamics, falling fertility rates, aging, and the demand for workers. Another recommendation we heard a lot, not just this afternoon, but over these past 2 days, is the need for improving migration data, which, as you know, is the first objective of the Global Compact. And as a footnote, I think it's the only international framework that I'm aware of that does not end with the recommendations to improve data, but starts with improving data. Very unusual, and this is not by chance. Ms. Dudziak pointed out that there was a 20-year gap, if I heard it well, in the censuses taken in North Macedonia and in the labor force survey. That's difficult to plan. And when you want to understand the dynamics of migration. But there was also a lack of sharing of existing data, she referred to, in North Macedonia. Alta Solberg helped us to understand the mobility dimensions of climate change. And when I just turned quickly to Professor Haas in the opening, I think he said something like, if you want to halt migration, tank the economy. And that has a lot to do with the world of work, as was explained by Ms. Misra this afternoon. She reminded us that there will be continued demand for low-wage workers, many of whom will be migrant workers. Crucially, she also highlighted creating work in home communities. And that reminded me of chapter 10 of the Program of Action of the 1994 International Conference on Population and Development. Chapter 10 on international migration and development, which by the way deals with both voluntary and forced migration, reads in part, the long-term manageability of international migration hinges on making the option to remain in one's country a viable one for all people. It's not just the right to leave one's country and to return to it, but there's also a right not to be forced to migrate. Small pitch, speaking of ICPD, on occasion of the 30th anniversary of the Program of Action, the Commission on Population and Development's 57th session will be held from 29 April to 2 May 2024, and it will assess the state of implementation of ICPD Program of Action. And the President of the General Assembly has just announced that he will hold a high-level commemorative event on 29th of April at 3 p.m. in the General Assembly Hall. Now, as we speak on international frameworks, Mr. Vente aptly briefed us not only about the absence of migration in the zero draft of the Summit of the Future Outcome document, but very helpfully also pointed to some entry points, including the chapter on financing for development. And here I'm looking to my colleague from the World Bank. I think he's sitting over there. And our colleague from IFAD, Mauro, I think he had to catch a train or a flight, but I talked to him already. And I'm also glad we see Germany, actually, one of the co-facilitators here in the room today. Colleagues, this afternoon's sessions clearly demonstrate that we cannot speak about migration in isolation. Our work must include the drivers of migration, the impacts at origin and destination. And that is why those linkages between migration and sustainable development, remember that's the title of the chapter 10, that's the title of chapter 10 of ICPD in 1994, is so crucial. And Mr. Solberg said migration must be part of national development planning. So let me be a little contrarian here. It's a lot about migrants, but I don't think it's all about migrants. It's also about communities at destination, communities at origin. It's about family members of migrant workers who, well, I don't like the phrase are left behind, but have not migrated. It's about trade, investment, labor markets, demographics, which all shape and are shaped by migration. Second point, the future of the work of the network. Clearly, we need to make sure that migration is safe, orderly, and regular. And yes, a focused attention to routes-based approach, migratory routes, routes, as we say in the US, I think, makes a lot of sense. But we must make sure that we are not treating migration in isolation. And that is also why the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration advocates for a 360-degree approach. Now, that's nothing new, you know that, but let me stress, or let me raise an angle that the network may wish to strengthen. And that is not just focusing on migrants as victims and on migration challenges. And I see already my neighbor knows where I'm going. Yes, there are vulnerable migrants. Yes, refugees need international protection. But migration is an opportunity for millions of people to improve their lives and livelihoods. Migrants have agency. Ms. Kenya gave some poignant examples of youth initiatives. There are many success stories of migrants as entrepreneurs, as Nobel Prize winners, as patent holders, as investors, diaspora investors, as sportswomen and sportsmen. It is important, I think, that our narratives reflect these multiple realities. Highlighting these success stories, these contributions, these realities can perhaps, just perhaps, help to change the negative narrative, which is so prevalent, as we all know. Future of migration at the UN. Now, we've already talked a little bit about the Summit of the Future. which, by the way, have a very important component of youth. So that is really, you know, and there's also an important gender component there, which you can all support and work with. But let's talk for a moment about the second IMRF, which will take place in 2 years' time. And I know we're all busy with evaluating the Global Compact on safe, orderly, and migration, regular migration, about looking at the implementation of the first Progress Declaration adopted 2 years ago by consensus, which I still think was a fantastic opportunity and a great success. And that needs to be done during the regional reviews that are coming up in the next 2 years. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, we need to think strategic. And now already we need to start thinking, what do we want to achieve in 2026? And yes, there will be the follow-up on the at least 2 mandates for the Secretary General that are in the Progress Declaration, addressing the improving the saving lives, let's put it that way, and the set of indicators. And so we expect and hope that the General Assembly can take action on those 2 items. But I heard something, oh yeah, speaking of the indicators, I think I need to plug the consultations again that are happening for member states next Tuesday. Fourth opportunity. We really are very interested in your input because we want to make sure that the proposal we're going to put forward in the report of the Secretary General this year will receive wide support, not just by member states, but also by stakeholders. And as you know, there are separate consultations as well with stakeholders. So please provide the input. We need that in order to have a consensual approach in 2026. But I heard something else over these past 2 days in terms of looking forward, in terms of strategy. And maybe it was me, because maybe it was me. I've worked with UNHCR on refugees, and I work on migration and development at the Secretariat in the United Nations now. So I have an interest in both the GCM and the GCR. But I'm pretty sure I heard it from you as well, that there was a clear message over these past 2 days that this is one area where we can and frankly should make progress in the area of complementarity of the 2 compacts. And I think it was mentioned by someone else already today. The vision of the New York Declaration on Refugees and Migrants is one of a Venn diagram with commitments for refugees, that's over there, commitments for migrants, that's one section. And guess what? The first actually chapter there is about commitments that apply to both refugees and migrants. Now, for some reason that we don't have the time to get into today, it was elaborated, I would say rather narrowly, into 2 separate compacts with no provision for commonalities between the 2. And indeed, as the GFMD rapporteur this afternoon, she used a much stronger word. I think she talked about the disconnect. And perhaps the GFMD, as an informal platform, can explore this issue before we can bring it to the General Assembly. And as our colleague from IFRC Online just said, complementarity not just locally, but also globally. So I think that the work on complementary implementation that is currently led, you can say, by UNHCR and by IOM is very important to build confidence. Once we have found common ground between those 2 entities and within the UN system at large, and of course also hopefully supported by stakeholders, then we can also dialogue with member states long before they meet at the 2nd International Migration Review Forum. So let me leave it at that. There should be a QR code coming on the screen very soon with a survey that you can, it's an anonymous survey, so please be frank about these 2 days of the meetings that we held here and that the UN Network Secretariat organized. Colleagues, let me close by expressing my deep appreciation to all of you. for working together to improve the governance of international migration over the past years and indeed decades. We've made a lot of progress. And that progress, I think, inspires hope, even though there's still a long way to go. It has been a huge privilege. Thank you. I believe that Miss Amy Pope is joining us very soon. So please stay where you are. And she will deliver some closing remarks. And then I believe there is also a reception hosted by her not far away, which is, of course, a wonderful opportunity. Because when I look at these meetings, and I think it's wonderful to have a program, and we had a good program. I particularly liked, I have to say, this afternoon's session, substantive speakers. We had some good opening speakers. But in the end, it brings us together. And not just online, but I again see value and was reminded of the value of bringing people together. The coffee hours, the dinners, the informal gatherings. And I think that is where lies much of the utility of a meeting such as this one. And so well, perhaps as we have a second or so, maybe I speak on behalf of all of us. If I thank the UN Network for Migration Secretariat for organizing this wonderful event. But at the same time, I see in my left corner of my eye that we're joined by Jonathan. And it's a privilege for me to join Ms. Amy Pope here, the new coordinator, on the podium. Thank you so much.
Good. So thank you so much, Bella. First of all, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Bella Hovey. You have been a mainstay of the UN's migration community, probably for longer than he cares to remember. And over 3 decades of service, Bella has seen a lot, but has contributed even more. He's on the cusp of retirement, which is bad news for all of us, but I'm sure very good news for you. And so I just want to use this opportunity where we have this community here together to acknowledge your immense contribution to the work and just to say thank you for your years of service. So thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. So now it is time to bring our annual meeting to a close, which I know you're sad about. I want to say thank you to our scene setters for kicking off our meeting and for the interventions that have followed. We were all reminded during the sessions of the urgent need to change the narrative about migration, to cut through the thickening fog of misinformation that is out there. And we know that this year, this work, the work of this community is more important than ever before. And I hope that everyone here too heard just how effective the Migration Fund is in supporting our partnerships and our delivery on the ground, and about how it can do more, including on issues like climate impact on human mobility, and how if we adequately fund this fund, we can do more to ensure that our stakeholders are fully involved at all levels. So I'm hoping that as you go back to wherever it is in the world that you're coming from, you will carry that message with you, because we know that the finances actually enable us to deliver the work. In our session on development, we heard from governments and the UN country networks on their successes and some of the real challenges that we face in implementing the Global Compact for safe, regular, and orderly migration. This is really a very promising area of work and one that I'm very excited about and that we at IOM are putting our full weight behind. The work shows that just as the fund, when the network is together working to support partners on the ground, we can do more. We can have more impact. We can be more effective. So in this second cycle of the Global Compact, we need to move from setting up structures to now making that impact to implementation. The session on protecting lives and saving lives showcases the many ways we can do more to support migrants. And of course, this is always going to be at the core of what we do as a network, what we do as an organization, what we do as people. We know that too many migrants are encountering unfathomable risks in their journeys. And that is not just in the context of irregular migration. Whether people are migrating with or without papers, we know that this community can be extraordinarily vulnerable to exploitation. It can be extraordinarily vulnerable to abuse, that people who are coming into a new system are not necessarily as equipped as they need to be to advocate for their rights, but also to advocate for things like fair pay and fair treatment. So we need to remain true both to the Global Compact for Migration, but also the SDG framework, that our first goal is to make sure that we leave no one behind. And I just want to highlight that the SDGs don't have an exclusion for migrants, right? The promise is we are leaving no one behind. So no matter your status, no matter your work, no matter your background, our job is to make sure that we bring everyone along with us on this journey towards sustainable development. And our final session was a good wrap up, talking about climate change, demographics, the nature of work, among other issues. Now we've got some really good ideas about how we can move the network forward. And more times over the last couple of days than even I can count, we heard how much we need to expand and improve opportunities for people who are on the move, creating pathways so people can migrate safely, so people can migrate with dignity. And so we can ensure that we are meeting development needs, not just in countries that are the least developed, but in all countries around the world. We also know that when we don't do this well, the costs are high. They're high in terms of the cost of human life and human dignity and human safety and human security. By the way, not just for the migrants themselves, but also for the communities where they go. And we know that often, far too often, people lose their lives when these systems do not work well. So this is a call to all of us here, whether you're in the government, whether you're in the UN, whether you're in the private sector, whether you're in civil society, whether you are representing migrants or a migrant yourself. We must work together. We must support the goals, the objectives of the GCM. We must push to expand more safe, sound, regular pathways for migration. So we have a lot of work to do. It's great that we have everybody here together to focus on that work because we have high expectations for this community. We have our regional reviews, we have the Secretary General's report, and it might seem like 2026 is really far away, but frankly, that time is going to fly. And in 2026, we have the next IMRF. So we need to start asking ourselves right now, what do we want the world's migration landscape to look like by the time we next gather in New York? Now, between now and then, a lot of things are going to be happening. And the political discourse suggests that it may not always be that positive, which is why now more than ever, this community needs to focus on concrete actions. Because in the face of what will be some storms ahead, we need to demonstrate how migration can work for all. We need to demonstrate how people can migrate safely with dignity and how their migration can enable better outcomes for more people. So I want to just say thank you to all of you because we have a lot of hard work together to do in the years to come. And having the relationships, having the partnerships, having the trust will be absolutely essential to achieving those outcomes. So thank you for being part of this. And those of you who are in Geneva, I invite you to continue to build on these partnerships, to build on these friendships by joining us at a reception, which will take place at the restaurant beginning almost immediately, right this second. And for those online, maybe raise a glass of wine or juice or wherever you are, a coffee, and think of us, think of the work we will need to do together. And I hope to see you in person next time. So I am bringing this meeting to a close and I wish you all a wonderful evening.